well, why this and why now?
Yeah.
And I think that those questions can help us to understand and gain a little bit of perspective on what that voice is inside of us. What sort of the core of the thing is, what that light is, like you were saying, like that's where we can start to see what that light is, and then it kind of ends up coming through us and we refract it. It comes through whatever our medium, our expression is, and we do that to the best of our ability. I do want to say that, those questions aren't a guarantee of anything. I think they present a possibility, but like anything, especially when you ask any kind of a question, we're so designed to just like have an answer. It's like, well, there's an answer to this, and once the answer's there, that's it. And it's
That's
like,
the
well,
trap.
yeah, that's the trap.
This is Way of the Artist with Brandon Colby Cook and Evan Schulte,
Identifying your blocks and demystifying your struggles,
so that you can claim your own path
and make your life a work of art. Welcome, everybody, to Way of the Artist podcast. Just one more welcome for the road. Thanks for being here. Thanks for tuning in. Thanks for clicking on this episode, which, forgive if it seems a little bit clickbaity, but the futility of finding your voice. And this is an interesting topic. I'm looking forward to seeing where this one goes. Brandon, you brought this kind of notion into the equation, which is like, have we not talked about this before? Because finding your voice seems like something that's just so token artist stuff. It's just like, I need to find my voice. I'm trying to find my voice. How do I find my voice? And it was like, yeah, there's probably a lot that we can get into here. And I think that the main thing that jumped out to me is kind of this fallacy, and as the title says, this futility of this notion of finding your voice. Because as we, kind of quickly just chatted through and broke down before we started recording, is that maybe finding your voice doesn't have so much to do with finding it as it has to do with allowing it. So let's get this one kicked off, my friend.
It's, I don't know. It's going to be interesting because I don't really know what to say about it other than from my own experience that it took me personally a while, I feel like, as an artist, to find my voice. I feel like when I was younger, it almost came out more naturally, but in a weird way, I feel like the work I did on learning my craft and I guess learning about people and growing up, it kind of became more stifled. And I think that has to do a lot with trying to just, I don't know, like be safe, like be okay and not,
I think you kind of, art and creativity becomes this thing that you kind of gotta package it and you've got to sell it, and it's and there's something. Those are all things that are great to have an awareness of, but yeah, like they can be things that ultimately end up stifling creativity and originality, and can suck the joy out of what was something that was once a beautiful, wonderful thing.
Mm-hmm. I think it's about finding confidence in like saying whatever it is you have to say, or, and I feel like I want to start by saying that I really do feel that your voice, whatever that might be, and as we get into it, maybe we'll describe that more or define it more, but it needs a vehicle. So whether it's you making a movie or writing a script or having a part to play or doing a painting or having a song or
doing a podcast,
doing a podcast, building a business, really anything, but it needs a vehicle for it to come out of. And it's something that you find almost by having a vehicle and using that vehicle to go somewhere. And through that, your voice kind of comes out of it. And I think that earlier on in my creative endeavors, like the first movie I made, which got me into filmmaking, it really did have my voice, but it was so just kind of off the cuff, and I wasn't trying to do anything. And I think that's why it worked. But I couldn't have told you what it was other than I just thought this was really funny, and it was really genuinely funny to me, and I didn't make any apologies for it. And so the film kind of worked. And it won first place at this little festival, which is why I became a filmmaker. I just was like, wow, I could actually make an impact. But after that, I learned more about screenwriting and movie making and all that stuff. But I feel like a lot of my work after that started to get further and further away from that voice that I initially kind of discovered. And I even remember like writing a scene one time, and it was kind of a cool scene and everything, but it was like Quentin Tarantino might as well have written it. It wasn't my voice, I was trying to kind of write in that style. I was trying to find ways to express stuff. And I remember I showed some people and they said, yes. I mean, they basically said what I thought they would say. And I was actually very disappointed the moment I kind of realized that, because they were like, this seems like Quentin Tarantino. And I was like, I was glad that I kind of had done that, but I was also felt really like I robbed myself because I just copied him. And I feel like that's a part of a lot of the time the creative process. You kind of model and you copy and you try what other people are doing, but and if you mimic it well, in a weird way, it helps you see that that's not your voice, that's someone else's, and now you're just speaking in their tone. And no one needs another Quentin Tarantino, as cool as he might be and as awesome as a filmmaker. We don't need another. We got one, and that's all we need. What we need now is an original something else, because he's cornered the market on that. So trying to copy him is just going to make a copy of everything else. And I had the awareness to recognize that I was just copying. And after that, it started a bit more of I'd say a pursuit of, well, what is my voice? But not knowing how to find it and just being like, and that's the weirdest part, I think, of this whole thing is, and I'm sure some people are probably in this if you're listening, is like, I don't even know where to start. I don't even know where to look. I don't know what it is. I mean, I don't know how I sound different than anyone else, or if I have anything to say that's different than anyone else does. And I think that is the beginning stage.
Yeah, and to just piggyback off of what you were saying, there is something to be said for doing an experimentation of trying to copy and mimic. There's a lot that you can learn from someone else, and also, to be fair, like if learning to write, like you write something like Quentin Tarantino, well, the reason why you probably did that is because you're like, there was something genuinely about the way that Quentin Tarantino writes dialogue or puts things together that you genuinely connects with you. There's something that you appreciate about it, and it can even give you a clue into kind of what your voice is. But the thing is that you can't just get stuck there. Like there's like the old like there's like a Zen parable. It's like, if you meet the Buddha on the road, kill him dead. And it's really the idea is that don't get hung up on the Buddha. Don't get hung, because eventually even that will be something you're attached to. It will be something that you're holding on to, and you won't go as far as you need to go. You'll get hung up. And that's kind of the same thing here, is that, you can get hung up on just trying to be like Tarantino. And she's like, well, you can't. Like you said, Tarantino's got the market on Tarantino. You can't out Tarantino. It's just, it's never going to happen. But there can be a quality to something that he does that it has something to do with what your voice is. You know, maybe there's something about, you know, just the quality of how that dialogue just kind of seems to stretch on out for. And it's like, you know what? Yeah, there's something about that. And that's the thing you can kind of extract from. You can say, it's like, yeah, I love how things kind of develop in this way. But then that's what you take for it and you move on, you know, and you can find in whatever your sort of outlet is, you know, different people who inspire you for very, very good reasons. But you have to move past that. But in a way, it's like, yeah, it could be a bit of a guidepost for a direction to go. It can give you some indications as to, you know, what your sensibilities are, you know, in how you create things. And there's real value to that for sure.
I think it's got to be a part of the stage of finding your voice, because I actually remember another story. This actually was a feature film that I had written, and the Burning Blues. I talked about it before, but we kind of went through this stage where, you know, we had some really decent financing, and there was like, you know, is this thing going to get green light? Is this going to be my big kind of break as a writer? And the producers got me they're like, well, let's do a table read and let's record it and let's see how it sounds. Let's put it on its feet, essentially. So I called all these actors and people I knew, and really like some big people, like people have been on major shows and all sorts of stuff. They all came out to this table read for this film. And small parts to big, man. We had the whole fucking thing. And we read it out. It was pretty good. But I remember one of the actors, and this was a guy who, he had a lot of experience. He'd been on a big show and all this, and he's a really good dude. But he pulled me aside at one point. He said, you know, this one scene in your story, it kind of reminds me of The Departed, you know, Martin Scorsese's, you know, that movie. And I was like, you know, that's because, like, when I wrote that scene, it was like I was just copying that movie, and it was so false. Like, like the moment he said it, I was like, I'm busted. Like that scene, not the whole movie. The movie had some good stuff, but it did have that scene, and it was a copy. And there's this weird feeling when you find yourself kind of using someone else's voice. It's like you almost think like, oh, hey, I achieved doing this. And at the time, I think when I was writing it, I thought, I don't know, I guess I probably didn't really know how to do the scene, and I hadn't done enough work to really figure it out. So I took a reference point from a movie I loved, and I used that. But side note, and this is kind of interesting, there was another scene in that movie, which was this little mini monologue. There's a little scene, but there's a bit of a monologue the character has. And the first, one of the literaries that read it, this wasn't from the table read, this was like before the table read, they read, and one of their feedbacks was, this scene's your movie. Like this, it was inspired. And that's because when I wrote that particular part, I was talking about these people who had betrayed me, and these people who, like, in my mind, I was just talking about people and how fucked up people can be and how shallow and selfish. And this guy's basically telling this detective, like when he's dealing with their informants, that the informants are like this. And it's just about it. Really, it's me talking about what people can be like. And I'm not a detective, but that for some reason rang true because that was true for me. And I started to see the difference between what my voice was and what my copying, what I thought was cool as a writer was. And it was in the same script. So I started to see like, oh, this is where I need to be putting my energy. And this kind of copy stuff is me being actually lazy and not trusting myself. So I don't know if that helps, but like, it's not definable. It's just that I know that I was telling the truth in one scene and I was copying in another.
Yeah, I think that you brought up a lot of things in there. Like definitely, like there's a quality to something, and it's it's somewhat indefinable, which is in many ways a lot of what we're talking about. Like, your voice is not necessarily this definable thing. And, you know, a lot of people, particularly in our culture, they really want you to define what that fucking thing is. You know, it's just like, well, what is this? And there's not that there isn't some utility to that, but, you know, like that statement of like, well, this is what my voice is, and this is the kind of things that I create and I do, and this is, you know, that can help, but it can also be something that can completely limit you in what you're doing and can actually take you away from what your voice is, because you might rule something out simply because you're like, well, that's not what I am. I mean, Stephen Pressfield talks about that in his classic. If you're a creative artist out there, we've recommended this, I don't know how many times, but it's worth recommending every single time. The War of Art by Stephen Pressfield. And, you know, he's an award-winning writer. And at the time that he wrote this book, he had all kinds of resistance to writing it, because he's like, well, I'm not a nonfiction writer. I only write fiction. You know, that's one of these things of you have this identity. You know, you said, it's like, well, no. My voice is, I write fiction. I write historical fiction, and this is da-da-da-da-da-da. And it's like, well, if he had bought into that, then he wouldn't have written one of the, what I would say, and what many people would say is one of the best books on the creative process that's ever been written. You know, we would be deprived of that if you get boxed into that kind of label. So in many ways, what we're talking about with your voice is like, there's a kind of indefinable quality that you kind of happen upon to a certain degree. And it's almost something like you happen upon. It's like you almost don't even know it until you're looking back at it. You know, and I think that that's an important indication of what's happening here, is that it's something that you look back at, implying that when it was happening, you weren't aware of it happening. You know what I mean? Like,
at least at first. I think at least maybe like as you get more comfortable with what your voice is, you kind of know how to do it more. But in the beginning, I think you're right. Like you don't know you're doing it so much when you're not. Like, it's hard to tell the difference. And I think that's kind of like the beginning of a creative process in a lot of ways. And I think sometimes, you know, like the first movie I ever made, I feel was like really, really genuine and really, really honest. But mostly because I didn't have any pressure for it to be anything. I didn't even plan on putting it in a festival. I didn't plan on doing anything with it. So it was just for fun. And because it was from such a genuine place, it was very like truthful and honest and funny. But I feel like that must be a part of the problem, is like when we think our art needs to do something. And like, I think any artist that understands, like if you just take a moment and you look at art and you look at like what art really like wins awards and has a major impact on culture and society, it's usually because someone found their voice and then really fucking went for it. Like, you know, Quentin Tarantino, like him or hate him, I mean, you know, that's his. You can tell his movies, like, you know, he's done it. Even when he writes a script and someone else makes it, you can kind of tell that he's had a touch on it, right? And great artists are like that. And there's a reason why they get paid so much, and there's a reason why they get so like acclaimed by us. And
well, usually
or hated.
No, yeah.
I mean, hey, finding your voice might not always be pretty.
Yeah.
But I mean, I think there is something really cool about it. But I think when we put pressure on ourselves because we recognize, hey, if I can find my voice, I could be successful. So then we put pressure on to find it. And I think that's kind of the point of this conversation, is that when you try to find it, when you say, oh, I'm going to define it, I'm going to like, it's this, and I have I've gamed the system. I think in a way you've done the exact opposite. It's more of a gamble on like, I'm going to try to tell my truth, And then through telling my truth, let's see what happens. And you might not like what you see, but that's kind of what your voice kind of is. It's not, it doesn't care whether you like it or not, but when it comes out, there's something about it that you're like, I mean, I just know this because I've done it a few times where I've had people literally be impacted by shit I've written or movie I've made, or an acting performance even. But it's like, I've had that happen. So I know I know what it's like. Can I do it by will? Can I do it and can I fully, maybe not yet, but I'm getting there. And all I know is that I got to keep trying to tell the truth. And through that, I'll weed out all this copy and mimic shit that I've learned how to do to basically look like I'm doing the truth. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. It's like you've got to continue to come back to, I think that important questions and these are questions that I've learned to ask myself, as through acting, and it's funny because a lot of teachers, I don't think I even learned this from teachers, but a huge part of my process now, especially at the beginning stages when I'm playing any part, is, after I've I've read through the script and usually read through it several times to really just let it start to soak in. And with that in mind of the character that I'm playing, I ask questions like, okay, what do I have to say about this? And not just what do I have to say about this? It's what do I have to say about this? What do I have to communicate through this character for me personally? And that's not something I fucking share with anybody. Director doesn't hear about that. Other actors don't hear about that. That is for me. That is mine. And it's about tapping into kind of that fire. And that fire is, what is the real source of meaning in this for you? Not for what you think it might be for somebody else, not what you think it might be for the audience that's going to come and see this later. No, right now for you. What is the sort of, what's the term? Existential urgency, of this for me. Hmm. And it's that kind of territory where that voice starts to be allowed to come out. Because again, if we're caught up in trying to think of, what people are gonna like, and there's no way that's going to happen. No, there's no way that voice is going to come out. Yeah,
you're not going to be able to control it. It's not controllable. I think that's the thing that at the end of the day, that's really the message that I think I've needed to learn, and I still need to learn in some ways, but I hope our audience walks away with this is stop trying to control the shit. Stop trying to feel like you can manipulate it. It has you. You do not have it. It is like a tidal wave that you're on when you're on it. And your job is to not get fucking sucked under the undertow. Your job is to stay on that and ride that fucking wave and embrace it. But if you are scared of the tidal wave, or you're scared of the wave, if you duck it all the time and you keep hiding from it, you'll never get that experience. And it's not just you might even go into your intent. And I'm just thinking from my own experience, but it's you go into your intent and you have what you think you have to say, but then there's you doing it. And then what that actually says, even though you think you know what you're saying, you might not. When I wrote this script, I've talked about this on a podcast before, because I use this kind of as a teaching tool right now for a lot of writers. But it's when I wrote Love Lost, there's a big part of that script that's about forgiveness. I had no idea that that script would get into that. That wasn't even what it was about for me. It was actually not even in my mind. So I've had a lot of people who have read the script and kind of looked at it, be wow, there's so many lessons in forgiveness here. I'm I guess there is, but I didn't plan on doing that. I needed to tell a story about this. And so I feel that's that tidal wave. That's it doing me.
Yeah, it came along for the ride.
Exactly.
That
And
thing
so
came
did
with
I
it. Yeah.
at the end of the day. But
Yeah,
yeah,
no,
like that's the voice, right? In a weird way. I mean, that's not the voice, but that's part of it. It came in a weird way. It showed something that I didn't plan on.
yeah, in many ways, the voice is something that's bigger than you.
Mm-hmm. Well, you
It's like,
said
it's
actually
weird. Your
before we
voice is
recorded.
bigger than you,
Yeah,
which is kind of,
you said it in an interesting way before we started recording, which was that it's not something has something to say through you.
yeah.
It's like it's not just yours. I think that's the thing. It's like it's going to get interpreted through your perceptions and your values and your just general feelings and whatever, but it's a bigger message than you, and it's like a humanity message that's going to get pushed through you. So because everyone else who experiences whatever you put down, whatever you create, they have their own interpret, but they don't look at it necessarily the way you do. They might see it that through your eyes,
Yeah.
but they experience the humanity in a weird way of what you did, right? And that's a whole other realm.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, I think
Very rare that you put me at a loss for words, Brandon.
I mean, I think that's the point, though. It is a loss of words. It's one of those things where you go like, well, let's dive in and see what happens. And I think that's the thing. I'm kind of actually realizing it as we're talking about it more, like that forgiveness lesson, that kind of came through that script. It's like, well, like forgiveness is such a ancient concept, love, whatever, all this, right?
Yeah.
It's like it's not new that I'm doing it, but somehow through my story, people are getting an experience and having a profound impact about forgiveness that is making them walk away somehow changed. Not my intent, not my plan, really, like not really what I was going to try to do, but through the story that I felt I needed to tell. And it's not just that. It's that the way I told it also, like I've had people say like there's so much of you in, like people who really know me, they're like, there's so much of you in that. And it's like, I mean, how could there not be? Because like, even when I'm writing a female character, it's like, yeah, there's so much of me in her because that's my truth. That's my voice. And it doesn't, the character, and that's the thing I realized is like the character or situation doesn't even have to be something I experience, but it's like an idea. And yeah, I don't even know. This is ridiculous. Yeah, I don't even know how to explain that.
It's like I think it's part of that funny thing and kind of a mysterious thing of the creative process, which is when you start allowing that voice and trusting it, and it starts coming through louder and clearer and clearer. It comes with all of these incredible surprises. It's like your voice should come almost as an adventure, like it's just like, okay, we're going like this is what's coming through right now. And yeah, like, and I think that it's just one of those beautiful side product benefits, because I've had a very similar experience with just, other works that I've done, whether it's written or performance, where it's like, okay, well, I thought I was doing this one thing, this was the thing that I was trying to say through that. But through that kind of focus and doing my very best to express that as honestly and truthfully as possible. And again, this is one of those things, like, it's not about being perfect in all of this, because, there'll be moments where you'll be like, oh, okay, you know what? Like that moment wasn't so good. That scene wasn't so good. This passage was like, I was doing something else. I kind of got lost into, some thought of what I thought it was supposed to be. But when you're really kind of connected and flowing with that voice and committed to saying that thing, I've had that same experience where suddenly it's just like, whoa, I didn't realize that there were all of these themes and undercurrents that were going on in this thing, like, because it wasn't my intention to put that in there. I wasn't consciously aware of it, but there's just like, it's this reminder that there's something bigger going on when you're doing that.
Mm-hmm.
There are kind of, without making it sound too, esoteric or anything, but like there's something bigger at play that's happening. There are forces that are coming into play that are beyond your understanding and control. That creative wave comes through and you're just channeling it in the way that you can best focus it. And then through that, suddenly it's just like, oh, and by the way, like there's this element and there's this element and there's this thing and there's this thing. And sometimes you only really see that upon looking back at it. But it makes sense, because anytime I've had that experience, I'm like, oh yeah, for sure. Like these are all are or have been, or at the time that I was doing this, were big things for me. These were things that were on my mind, but I wasn't intentionally putting in here, but there they are. They just kind of emerge, and I find that absolutely wonderful and fascinating. And in many ways, it's expressed in a way that's better than I could have done it if I had tried to express it,
It's actually reminding me of an analogy. And look, I'm not a science guy, so I have a basic understanding about this, but it's like little kid asks their parents, mommy, daddy, why is the sky blue? And most parents be like, I don't know how to answer that question, but why is the sky blue? Because light is naturally, like, let's just say white, right? It's when light bends, it creates color. I mean, essentially, this is a very basic, non-scientist description, but when light bends, it creates color. That's why we have rainbows and stuff like that, because, there's a different density, I guess, in the atmosphere, which bends the light, which creates color. That's why we get a blue sky or an orange sky, or we get a series of colors in a rainbow. And the thing is like, I'm thinking a lot of it like this: your voice is how you bend the light. It's the light that needs to come through you, but you don't know how you bend it until the light hits you. And you have to kind of like let the light hit you so that you can bend it. And then you're going to see how it comes out of you. And it could surprise you, And the other thing too is, don't forget that light is only understood in this understanding that there's darkness. So the darkness which is around you, which isn't even necessarily going through you, is gives context to the light that you're refracting and showing. So, there's a saying in philosophy and in cinematography, which I've always loved. It's just like, the brighter the light, the darker the shadow, which is also another interesting part of, if you want to take in context of your voice, sometimes our intent to shine a light so brightly on something is what shows how dark it is. And we're like, I'm trying to do this really good thing. And so like, people can be like, I'm going to do a comedy. Like there's this show I thought was hilarious called Barry. It's on HBO, but there's this part and they're actors talking about it. And this one part, she goes, we're going to do this comedy scene. Don't worry, it's just a comedy. But it's like, don't you know that comedies are often way more, like real good comedies usually have a darker side than even a lot of dramas, because the more light there is, often the more darkness is revealed. And in a weird way, the darkness is what actually amplifies that light, if we want to use this kind of analogy, right? Like for comedy, if comedy's the light and drama's the darkness, in some ways, with comedy, if you were to take away the laugh or take away the punchline, you would see how deeply emotional and depthy a lot of this stuff is sometimes. But it's like, I feel like it's kind of like that. I feel like your voice is a little bit like, you're the thing that refracts or bends the light. That's your perception. And this idea or concept hits you, and how you bend it and the way it comes out of you, that's your voice. But you're not going to know. And also, you're not the light. You're the thing that bends the light. Yeah.
I want to take this into kind of a realm of just like, because we've established a few things about, some of the pitfalls of finding your voice, and, what this thing is actually about your voice, is how can we start to get into touch with it? Are there some things that we can do that can assist with that process? Because I think that there definitely are. Not that they are necessarily always there's a perfect system for this, but I think that sometimes there are ways, there are questions that we can ask that kind of help just shift the landscape a little bit, that can kind of give us a little peek and a window into what those things are. And one of the things that this conversation is making me think of is what our guest a few weeks back, Ted Whittall, shared with us, which was, with any, he was talking in reference to, doing plays, I think doing theater. And because theater is a place where, we're constantly bringing back old stuff, we're constantly bringing up, Shakespeare or Ibsen or Chekhov, Tennessee Williams, these sort of classics, and we're continually, they're being resurrected and being produced. And he asked a few questions, which is something that's been kind of kicking around for me ever since, which is why this and why now? Because at the time it was written, those authors, there was a why this and there was a why now. There was that urgency. There was something meaningful that had to be said, and they said it as honestly and truthfully as possible, to communicate that to an audience. And, and that it's important that if we're bringing these things back, we ask that question once again, why this and why now? Because there might be a different reason. Kind of like what we're talking about, where it's you look back, you're like, oh shit, I didn't even realize this was all there. There might be a whole different view and perspective on a work that wasn't necessarily the author's intention, but was built in there, in some way that they didn't intend. But I think that those are questions that we can ask ourselves when we set out on any kind of creative endeavor, is, okay, well, why this and why now? And I think that those questions can help us to understand and gain a little bit of perspective on what that voice is inside of us. What sort of the core of the thing is, what that light is, like you were saying, that's where we can start to see what that light is, and then it kind of ends up coming through us and we refract it. It comes through whatever our medium, our expression is. And we do that to the best of our ability. I do want to say that, those questions aren't a guarantee of anything. I think they present a possibility. But like anything, especially when you ask any kind of a question, we're so designed to just have an answer. It's well, there's an answer to this, and once the answer's there, that's it. And it's
trap
that's the trap, because we can easily, we can be, at least for, maybe I'll just speak for myself, I can be very clever in thinking that I'm telling the truth and not really getting the truth, not really getting to the heart. Not that I'm lying. It's not that I'm lying, but it's that
you're not trying to be deceptive.
Yeah, I'm not trying to be deceptive, but it's more so sometimes that I'm trying to be clever. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Trying to know what you mean. Yeah, that trying to be clever and trying to be interesting can be, man, that can just absolutely ruin shit, man. That can just absolutely ruin shit for you. And so that's something where we need to understand as well. That's something we need to see, that that can be at play, and beginning to learn to recognize, just oh, I answered those questions and it sounds really nice, but that's not really what this is about. It doesn't mean that whatever that is isn't important for you to say, but that there's still, you can dig deeper. You can dig deeper until you hit that place where it lights you up. To just continue on this sort of analogy, it's something that just like, it lights you up. It's a fire. It's like boom, and it's an emotion. It's a feeling, and you just go like, okay, that's when you're onto something. You know, like we do have those tools. We've said it so many times in the show before. You know, like just how important our emotions can be in communicating very important information to us.
Inspiration, you know, inspiration is such a great beginning. And I think that, you know, anyone who's an artist, they talk about inspiration, you know, it's a big part of the whole thing. And because inspiration is often it's that first thing that gets you started. You get inspired about something and then you kind of begin. And inspiration, in my experience, a lot of the time, it doesn't have a lot of the answers after getting you started. Like sometimes they just start to fill in and fall into place, but usually it's the thing that kind of you need to get going. And if you follow it, it has some truth to it. Man, you said some really interesting stuff. I was going to say that.
I know I went on a rant there. So
that's great. It was a great rant. And I just wanted to go back to one thing. I really do think that you need a vehicle for your voice to come out. I think you need a vehicle. And I was going to say, like, the one of the first ways to find your voice, like to get yourself in the running, get yourself in the game, is get a vehicle, get something you could do or put yourself towards, or energy, right? Like an inspiration even can just help, you know, a vehicle, right? But you said, you know, you reminded me of Ted's question, you know, why this, why now? And like, that's kind of the next thing after, like, well, you got a vehicle, well, why this, why now? You know, and that can kind of help you fill in that gap a little bit more and help you kind of go, well, you know, I don't know, like it's interesting because I don't think you have to necessarily have a clear-cut answer, why this, why now? But that question in and of itself kind of opens up the door to get you to ask. And through asking, you ponder it. And through pondering it, maybe something comes up. And I mean, it's funny, like, it's just weird how things happen. Like I talked about a couple scripts, right? Like the Burning Blues, which is an interesting journey with that script, because when I first started writing that script, like why this, why now, was I wanted to write a detective story. And I was also like, one of my colleagues was really encouraging me to get, you know, write stuff to sell. And so I was like, well, if I was going to write something to sell, I don't know, I kind of want to like write a detective movie. And so then that's where that started. And then I don't know where this came from, but I thought about like the marriage, like, and having a kid and being a detective and being undercover and what that would be like. And that made me look into that more. And I don't know if I was necessarily clear on like what I was doing, but after we had done that table read, which was like a year or two later, something like that, and the script had changed a lot, I was telling my friend, the same one who kind of pointed out that one of the scenes was like The Departed. I was telling him about the original concept. I was telling him about how this guy was growing apart from his wife. And it does sound a little bit like Donnie Brasco or something like that, but it really wasn't about that. It was more of a drama story about a guy and a guy and a woman and a kid. And the fact that he was a detective was actually kind of just part of the story, but it wasn't really the point. Later, the point became about the detective. And I think that was a lot to do to appease the producers and appease the idea of who can we put in this and what kind of action sequences can we have? And, you know, it became a lot about kind of the industry and making it work. But initially, that idea had this really good nugget of truth. And I think the thing about finding your voice is that you can get pulled away from it by trying to do what you think you need to do. And I feel like that script is like a classic example of me kind of getting pulled away from why I did it in the first place. Like, yeah, there was kind of this impetus to like write a script that would sell and do that. And yeah, obviously it did generate that possible opportunity. But the actual story that I cared about, the truthful story, got lost in all of that. And I feel like maybe there's a way to like sometimes obviously appease what you need to do to get something made and get the money behind it, but at the same time like not lose your voice. Because I feel like what happened with that particular project was the more money that got involved and the more people that got involved, the more it got away from what I was actually trying to say. And I think that's interesting because I wasn't asking why this, why now, like anymore. It was more about like, well, how do I give them what they want? And
Yeah.
that's not really my voice, right? Like that's just trying to please other people.
Well, I mean, it's, you bring up a good point, but I think that no matter what, everything you do benefits from having some sort of a connection to that why this, why now, to injecting that focus of what's important for you to say in this thing and letting that be the thing that guides you. Because then beyond that, like, yeah, like if you're connected to that, you can insert probably just about anything, like as long as that thing still runs through it. Like, some people aren't as crazy about it, but one of my favorite movies of the last decade was Mad Max Fury Road. Like it was a visual treat for the eyes, for one, but it would be a mistake to call that just an action movie. It would be a mistake. It would be a mistake to think that that was just a movie about a car chase, because it was about so much more than that. Like there are so many things that are going on within that story that just happens to fit in with this kind of this crazy, chase through the frickin' desert, through this wasteland, themes that are just really deep in our humanity, that, themes of hope, themes of corruption, themes of, looking out for people in times of need, like there's so much happening in that story, so it's like, this is what I mean. Like you can still have, all of the action and the fights and the craziness, like and that's an example of over the top craziness that goes on in that movie. But there's something that deeper that's connecting the whole thing that makes that whole sequence of action mean something, because otherwise it's just another car chase.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah.
Yeah, I think you bring up a good point. It's like there's something at the core that you need to stay connected to. And, I don't know, like, I don't know how to describe what that is, but I think that, you need to stay, whatever happens, because I think particularly with the movie industry, because there's so many people that get involved in the making of a movie, and
yeah,
in a movie that doesn't even get made, like people who aren't in the film industry, have never been on the side of the creative side of trying to get a movie made, have no idea. There's so many people, and the money and the pressure and this, like the strings that are being pulled and the packaging that's trying to be done and all this shit, and the constant like experience of like hope, and especially when you haven't really got a name for yourself yet, and like, will this even happen, and what do I have to do to keep people happy, and like, not, like it's like a fish on a rod, like a massive fish, and you don't know if you're going to lose it or not, and the thing is like the desperateness that's kind of in it. Like it's, I don't know how to explain it, but these things are what take you away from your voice. And like the thing that I think I've learned over the last decade, I guess, of all of this is like, that you have to have a certain amount of confidence that what you're bringing to the table matters and is something. Because I mean, take my experience so far as a warning, because it's like, I feel like, and it's, I hate this. I hate to even admit this, but it's like, I feel like a lot of my trying to accommodate was what made certain things fall apart, you know? And I think that I can walk away from that and go, well, okay, like you're in a gamble. You're in a fucking whirlwind when you're in this situation, right? And I mean, if you have some, you know, maybe if you have something already done, it's a little bit easier to kind of say it, but you have to trust that whatever you're bringing to the table creatively, that if people are going to get behind it and start like putting their money down, like to like, and get serious about putting people in it, like something has to be working. And you got to know that you as a creative were a part of that. And you got to hang on to that. And that's your voice. That's your thing. And I think the thing is like, I never had any idea of like valuing my own voice. It was so much about, okay, now that we've gotten here, now let's just try and jump through the hoops and do the things that people need. And I think, you know, I know so many people who have written scripts and, you know, and like sold scripts and made lots of money, and they've never had their movie made. And it's like, it's because like people think, oh, you sold your script, now your movie's going to get made. No,
Yeah.
you might sell 5 scripts and still not get any of them made. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so the desperateness of trying to get it from starting line to finish line with your name still attached and, you know, all that, it's like, you know, and I can imagine that really, if you probably parallel any art, you know, I'm sure actors can relate to that with all their additions and callbacks and all that bullshit. And then, you know, people who are doing sculpting and their rock breaks or whatever they're doing, you know, and they're in the middle of it, you know, all this kind of stuff that can happen that just, will I complete this masterpiece that I'm trying to, well, it's masterpiece in your own mind, trying to get to the finish line. And I think in the middle of all of this, I'm just kind of thinking in this conversation, the thing I'm realizing is you got to hang on to that nugget that's you, because that is a very important part of why this even exists. I just feel like as an artist, it's very easy to lose sight of that.
It certainly can be, especially when, you know, you are within some kind of an industry that's making demands of you. And the thing is that never really stops. I think that there are very few people within their industries that pretty much just get to do what they want to do, you know, and nobody will give them shit about it. You know, it's like, I think of like in film, you know, who pretty much, basically you got James Cameron, maybe Christopher Nolan. I don't even think like the likes of Tarantino and you know, Scorsese, like they still have troubles getting the stuff that they want to do done, you know. In music, who you got? Beyonce can probably do whatever she wants. You know, like it's
well, and a lot of these people, they end up financing their own stuff because even at that level, and people don't realize that because they know things fall apart. You know, that's why they create their own production companies, and, you know, because they know that if they leave it in the hands of someone else, I mean, there's so many pieces that can kind of crumble and the whole deal can fall apart.
Totally. I was just reading in the Hollywood Reporter, because I guess Warner Brothers is taking some serious flack right now for some decisions that they've been making, but I didn't realize that you know, someone within Warner Brothers basically tried to sabotage the Joker. Didn't want it made. Didn't want it to get made. Lowballed Todd Phillips on it, made him a low offer. He took it, and then he got extra financing from another company. But it's just like, you know, like that was an incredible film. You know, like, and it made a ton of money at the same time. But I mean, you know, you just go with something like that. Like, you know, you're working with a well-established franchise with somebody who's very experienced in the industry, both both as a director and as a lead actor, you know, like it's, and there's still troubles to be had, you know, even with that, with the quality of people involved with it. So.
Yeah. I mean, and that's kind of, you know, that's kind of the whole thing about having it made it, have you made it and all that. And it's like, you never really, like, there's actors like Pacino even, you know, it's like, there's people who you think like, well, this guy's done so many good movies. He should just be able to do anything he wants. And, you know, he should be able to get paid what he wants. And it's like, no, you know, people get older, things change, you know, you know, I think the thing is like kind of coming back to it all. Your voice is going to be the reason as a creative why someone is going to value what you do. I think that we can all accept that. Like your vision, you want to call it your vision, your voice, your touch, your whatever your thing is, like your ability, right? That, but it's not just your talent. I'm not talking about that. It's your inner like source energy that comes into whatever you do through your filters and perceptions and whatever that makes it kind of signature, proprietary, you know, that thing. That's what people want. That's the special thing. How to get that special thing to come out of you by will, I think it comes down to a tremendous amount of trust and honesty and faith in yourself and valuing of yourself. And I think you have to like find those things and let go and let them do. I don't think you can make them do, but I think you have to find like a real true value in yourself and really believe that you have a voice or a touch or a vision. And then you have to give yourself a vehicle, and then you have to honestly pursue that. And I think the honesty is the hardest step, because that's where I'm talking, not just honesty, I'm talking about vulnerability. That's where you're going to have to put things in that you can't fake it, because the moment you fake it, it's not going to be your voice. It's not going to be your thing anymore. It's going to be bullshit. And I think that's the really, really hard part for all of us, because it's such a counterintuitive thing.
Yeah, it goes against so much of our
survival.
Our survival instincts, for sure. Yeah,
it's so much easier to just play it safe, right? Like, I mean,
yeah,
and fit in and to try and be liked and accommodate others. An artist in a lot of ways has to kind of rock the boat and be willing to say, like, I don't care if you don't like this. It's what I want to do. It's what I want to say. And, you know, that's a part of it in a weird way.
Mm-hmm. What are you sipping on there, sir?
Right. I'm having a classic. And I think for the next couple, I'm going to have a couple different classic beers. I went away from the, let's call it, traditional craft brewery. Although you could say it's all craft in its own way. This is the Kilkenny Irish Cream Ale.
Oh, Kilkenny.
Yep. And I love this beer. It's such a good beer. I mean, it's obviously why it's so popular, and it's just, but I love a good cream ale. And this is one of the best, and it holds up. So that's what I'm drinking today. Nice.
Yeah, no, I haven't had one of those in a long time, but it's nice. It's very creamy.
Oh yeah. It's smooth. Yeah. It's, you know, it's just a nice beer.
Very nice. I'm drinking Crooked Coast from Driftwood Brewery. It's kind of got a nice mythological kind of labeling on it with like a little sort of Puck type of character and witches and demons and all kinds of stuff. This is an alt beer. An alt beer, which I'm afraid I can't quite place where alt beer fits into the spectrum of beers, but it's kind of like an amber beer. And I haven't even checked the alcohol percentage on this one, because I got to be honest, I'm feeling it. But you know what? It's only 5.1, so who knows?
Well, mine's only 4.3, so I got it easy.
All right. Well, let's we're at the witching hour.
Yeah.
Once
Did we
again.
accomplish anything? Did we get any more clarity on this? I think we got some clarity. I think we opened up some doors to at least kind of think about.
Yeah, no, I think I really enjoyed this conversation, and you know, I guess just to wrap things up is I'll just kind of reiterate that, and like, you know, I think that this whole thing of our voice again is something that we allow to come out, and that we don't necessarily know what that thing is definitively, but when we're connected to that source of what you're really here to say, and you're committed to saying that thing that means something to you as honestly and truthfully as you can muster through whatever your medium is, whatever your craft is, whatever your, you know, whatever that thing is, the voice comes through. It just comes through, and you only kind of can begin to recognize it by sort of looking back through it and recognizing, oh yeah, there's this quality to that. And the more that we can trust that thing that happens, the easier it becomes to be in that space and to allow it to come through. And the more we can recognize when we're trying to be just a bit too clever for our own damn good, you know, and we get stronger and stronger with doing it, the more we learn to practice that. So yeah, again, like what's what's the fire? What is it that you have to say, you know, in this? Not just from an intellectual standpoint, from a gut and heart standpoint. You know, what is that telling you is important to you? And I think that's where you begin to discover what that voice of yours kind of is.
It's I don't know, man. I don't really know how to sum it up, because I feel like it's one of those things. We I don't know. Like, I feel like we talked about some really cool things, and you know, if I was to go back to my very first film, and kind of like we had like, I don't know, like 300 people or something that was watching this film, and I just remember I had to present it. Everyone had to walk up and present their film, and I remember I walked up, and like I was just like a kid. I was like 16 years old. And I remember being like, I made a little film. I hope you like it. Because I didn't have anything to say about it. It was just like my friends kind of encouraged me to put it into this thing. And it was like, all right. And I thought it was funny, and they thought it was funny, and people who had seen it thought it was funny. But I was like this is a lot of people. And this is also adults too. Like, we were kids. And I went to the back and kind of sitting back there with everybody who's like kind of the creators, whatever. And I just remember watching, and everyone was laughing, and they were laughing through the whole thing. And one of the things that was in this movie was like there was this camp that I was at, and it was summer, and they didn't want us wearing shirts. And they didn't want us wearing, they wanted us wearing shirts. They didn't want us walking around shirtless around the camp. And I thought it really pissed me off. Like, it pissed me off a lot. So in this movie, anytime someone took off their shirt, someone would jump across the screen and tackle them and be like, security, and like just tackle this person. And they just happened to be this very poignant time moments that just kind of worked. Like, and they came by surprise. And like, so something about that movie, it kind of sparked an idea. Like, I was pissed off about something, and I wanted to show how stupid it was. I wanted to show how stupid their no shirt rule was. And so I put it into the movie, and I incorporated it into the story. And my emotion about it created something truthful and honest that created a style into this movie, which worked and obviously made people laugh and got us to win, right? But it's like, I think that when you're going to find your voice, let your emotion do a lot of the work for you. You know, let that, if something makes you angry, if something burns inside, it's like something agitates you, something makes you really excited, like follow that feeling, because I think that at least has some clues to whatever you have to say is.
Thanks for listening to the show. If you got something out of this, if you feel it improved your life or your journey in any way, please take a moment to subscribe, leave a review, or share the episode.
You can also support us on Patreon, where we have tons of great bonuses. You are the ones that make the show possible and help us to thrive. Thank you for joining us.